let me try one thing.
That is better. I don't know what you changed.
Turn the light on.
Oh.
Okay, let me try one thing.
All right, we are now live. Let me make sure to record. Here we go. That's fine. Okay. Hi all, and welcome to the University Press of Florida Acquisitions Chat. I'm here with three of our acquisitions editors, Stephanie Hunter, Sean Hunter, and Mary Puckett. And before we go into any questions, we're just going to let them tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do here. So why don't we start with Stephanie?
Sure. So I'm Stephanie Hunter. I am currently serving as interim editor-in-chief, and I acquire in Latin American and Caribbean studies, literature, and with the focus on medieval and modernist literature, gardening, and I've recently started working on our dance books as well. Did you want more about me, or is that a sufficient introduction?
I mean, that's fine. Whatever you whatever you want people to know that would help them.
That's most important. That's definitely the most important piece.
All right. And Sean?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Sean Hunter. I'm Senior Acquisitions Editor at the Press, and I'm currently acquiring in American history with a special emphasis on African American history and Southern history. Also space and technology studies, which is really exciting. That's a new area I've taken on recently. Natural history, and then a lot of our general interest books with a special emphasis on Florida culture, cooking and foodways, and music history.
Great. And last but not least, Mary?
Okay, I am the press's acquiring editor for historical archaeology. So that includes anything that happened after contact, and also some of our underwater and island archaeology.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So I have a few questions just to get us started. And so the first question is just kind of a general, tell us about, the acquisitions editor life. What do you do on a daily basis? What does it look like day to day to be an acquisitions editor? And I'm going to throw that question to Sean.
Well, I would say, so there's like this core three things, I think, that is probably pretty consistent. Caffeine, communication, and constant juggling. That's a new compound word, constant juggling. Because there's really, I swear, there's no set day in an acquisitions editor's life. I mean, we do have, the usual standing departmental meetings. We have twice monthly manuscript transmittal meetings, quarterly board presentations. But really the heart of our life kind of has these three main chambers, which I would say is finding new books, conducting a rigorous peer review process, and then transmitting the final and approved manuscript over to our colleagues in editorial design and production. And each of those three chambers has like a gazillion possible parts. So that's where the juggling comes, because, on that front end, the finding books, might be evaluating proposals one day, or working with a trade book author to develop their manuscript, or planning academic conference appointments, even in the remote virtual pandemic world, researching or reading in one of my subject areas, or talking with an author to refine their book idea. And then with peer review, we're finding readers for the peer review, we're analyzing the formal reports and revisions process, preparing board dockets, negotiating contracts. And then the transmittal phase is really, really intense team process of tying up loose ends, clearing permissions, and things like that. So, while I love lists, and I'm like super analog on that element, I like to strike things through. It's kind of an aspirational thing, I suspect. But, pretty much by mid-morning any day, I've already reprioritized my list, because you just need to be present and deal with the concerns or the opportunities that come through, whether it's helping a colleague out or talking with an author, they, show up and need some help. But every day, I get to learn something new. I get to work with really smart people in-house and authors. It's just, it's pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, and I would say, that's one of the best parts of the job, is working with really smart people and people who really care about both the research that they're doing and the books that they're writing. And like Sean said, I can't think of a day a normal day. I don't think I have one. I have a lot more meetings, and there's a lot more networking and conversations than I think I had expected from this job. And especially right now, when we're not doing the in-person conferences and in-person events, trying really hard to reach out to people, set up Zoom calls, talk to them about what's happening in the field, what they're interested in, what they're working on, just continuing to be active in that network. That's a significant investment of my time, I think, so that I'm better able to acquire really great books and evaluate them and find, the right readers for those books. So being attentive to that network.
Yeah, and one thing that has become a regular part of my, not daily life, but probably on a weekly basis, since many conferences have been canceled, a lot of scholarly organizations have implemented a webinar series and things like that. So that's a definite, not a daily task, but it's a way that I spend a relatively large amount of my time every week. And that's been really a fun way of kind of networking and like a nice replacement for conferences, I guess, since we don't have those in person. So that's just kind of been an additional new fun way to learn about the field.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying that, actually, that there are more events happening online, and there's more, in some ways, more opportunities to participate in the network than if you had to travel somewhere. So I've been trying to do that too. It's been really enjoyable.
Great. That sounds like a lot of fun to me. So another question that I have is just kind of more of a general question is, are there some books that are coming out this conference season or into next year that you're really excited about, that you want to make sure that people are on the lookout for? And we can start with Stephanie.
So I have a short list because I can talk about my books for a very long time. So I'm going to try not to do that. In Latin American Studies, we have a series that has been really active. It's a newer series, Reframing Media, Technology, and Culture in Latin America. And we have a couple of books coming out of that series in the next few months. One is an edited volume by Ted Henkin and Sarah Garcia Santamaria on Cuba's digital revolution. And there's a second one that's on Afro-Latinx digital connections. It's also an edited volume. And I'm really interested in that one because it's looking at how technologies are used by people of African descent in Latin America and the Caribbean to challenge racism and to promote social justice. And I'm really excited for that book to come out. We have a couple other books actually on Afro-Latin American studies. One, Takara Brunson's Black Women, Citizenship and Making Modern Cuba. There's one on dance in Cuba, African dance, and the Dictionary of Latin American Identities. Within the literature list, we focus mostly on medieval and modernist literature. Within medieval, I'm really interested in focusing on gender, women and gender in literature. And we have a volume coming out by Rachel Golden and Catherine Kong, Gender and Voice in Medieval French Literature and Song. And then we also have our Joyce series that's edited by the fantastic Sebastian Knowles. And there's always some really exciting books coming out. Right now, there's one on, it's called Rewriting Joyce's Europe, and it's about like typography and language and letters and how Joyce was interacting with this between World War I and World War II. The last list area would be dance, and I just transmitted a book that I'm really excited about that is sort of a follow-up to a book we published in 2014, I think, on jazz dance. And this is, the new book is going to be on African aesthetics in 21st century jazz dance. And I'm really looking forward to that one coming out. I think that will be at the end of 2021, but that's going to be a good book as well. I can talk more if you want me to talk more. Also, I want to do a shout out to Holman, Florida. We just put it on the website like last week, and I'm so excited about this book. I'm very proud of it. It's going to be in the fall, I think, coming out.
All right. Sean, why don't you talk a little bit about new books that you're excited about?
Sure. And yeah, like Stephanie, I could talk all day. And I'm not picking favorites. If I forget to mention yours and you're an author out there, you know, we all, it's so hard. It's so hard. But a few, like thinking about especially the history conferences coming up, we have Deanna Gillespie's study of the Citizenship Education Program and Black women's political culture. And the CEP was a grassroots literacy program that ran through the Deep South, through which Black women taught neighbors and strangers how to read. And this book is the first comprehensive study of the CEP. And Gillespie just does a beautiful, beautiful job of highlighting Black women's political work, developing these classes as incubators for civil rights education, community action, as well as personal independence through reading. And I just loved how Dee brought forward so many individual women, because literally there were tens of thousands of teachers and students in these programs who, taken together, figure as this quite major, if poorly recognized to date, movement for social and racial justice in the US. So it's really neat. Lots of wonderful stories in there, and collectively just so important. Another history book that's coming out soon is Slavery and Freedom in the Shenandoah Valley during the Civil War era, and that's by Jonathan Noailles. And this is a really interesting history to me because this area in Northern Virginia was a major theater of the Civil War, and yet very little has been written about African Americans' resistance to slavery there, as well as the formal and informal war participation by Black people, their lives. And contrary to older studies that when they did mention anything about slavery in the Valley, unfortunately said that was, you know, more benevolent there. Noailles just dispels that pernicious old saw, and he brings really deep archival evidence to show not only was the institution of slavery in very full force there, but the ways in which the turbulence of war affected the dynamics of freed people's efforts for autonomy and community during and well after emancipation. So it's a really important study that way. Another neat book that's coming out soon is People Power, which is edited by Wesley Hogan and Paul Ortiz. In this book, the essays and oral histories in this book are inspired by the work of Texas activist and academic historian Larry Godwin. And just throughout the book, it prompts questions like, what motivates people to move from kitchen table conversations to civic engagement? Or how can teachers decolonize the academy? And so like even yesterday, so on one of these webinars that we now have more access to, I was listening to a panel of scholars and activists and politicians in a UCLA sponsored webinar, and Dr. Ortiz commented on it. And he noted during it saying he heard 3 key points across all these conversations. And he said, quote, organize, organize, organize. And it was like yesterday's kitchen table was a webinar. And it's really inspiring to me to see as an editor how both Ortiz and Wes Hogan and other scholars and activists live their engagement. That was really neat. So a little shout out for Quito Swan's book. It's already been published. It was published last year, but this is Paulu's Diaspora, Black Internationalism and Environmental Justice. And it's been honored as one of Black Perspective's best Black history books of 2020, and was also a finalist in the 2021 inaugural Asala Book Prize. So woohoo, that was awesome. It's really exciting to get that back out. And keep the good word going through his scholarship there. A little bit different towards the natural history and environmentalism side, we have The Gulf South, which is an anthology of environmental writing, which is edited by Tori Bush and Richard Goodman. And this is the first collection of environmental writing about the Gulf South region that's from Texas all the way across to Florida. And Bush and Goodman just did a fantastic job gathering a diverse set of voices over 100 years and lots of different genres, from journalism to poetry to memoir to even graphic nonfiction. And let's see, in the Florida realm there, we have The Thing About Florida by Tyler Gillespie, which it's just, this is a beautifully written, a little fangirl moment. It's beautifully written. It's slightly funny. It's deeply humanizing and caring. And Tyler takes us on this reality tour of Florida. Many of us, myself included, have laughed at the crazy Florida stories. But he takes us behind those memes, really, to show us all the fascinating and complex people and subcultures that make up or that are in Florida. And he tackles the Florida man phenomenon head on, and shows us how it's the combination of Florida sunshine laws and social media that's just like kerosene to this phenomenon. He explores the world of reptile expos, Repticon. He presents the housing and community crises faced by aging LGBTQ people in Florida. So it's really just a beautiful book, beautifully written, and just he takes us on a journey with him, to get a better, more fully dimensional understanding of Florida. Okay, one or two more. So we've got the Palmetto Book coming out, which is Histories and Mysteries of the Cabbage Palm, and it's by John O'Miller. And this book technically is a natural and cultural history of the lowly cabbage palm, but really it's like this veritable curio cabinet. And John O'Miller is the best person to take us on this journey. Cabbage palms are like the Zelig of the Florida environment. But it's just, he does a superb job of getting us to slow down and let wondering about one item teach us so much. It's really neat. So, and then, looking towards fall, we have 309, A Punk House in the Deep South, which is by Aaron Comet Bus and Christopher Satterwhite. And this book offers a history of one of the oldest continuously inhabited punk houses in the United States, told through interviews of people who live there. And 309 became this nationally known haven for musicians, artists, activists, as well as a long-standing site of deep resistance in the South, in what I think could arguably said is an unlikely city for that. We don't, you might think about a big city, but Pensacola is not large. And I just love how this book teaches us anew about the importance of creating and accepting community in our rapidly changing world, because that's really the true ethos of punk culture, not the stereotypes, not the ripped and zipped fashion. It's this DIY type of ethic that sustains an extensive social network, managing to be sort of both deeply communal and yet radically individual. So anyway, yeah.
Mary, do you have a couple new books coming out you want to highlight?
Well, I only have a couple. but I'm really excited about them. Probably the one I'm most excited about is Alicia Mcgill's book, Negotiating Heritage Through Education and Archaeology. And this is a really cool book because Mcgill has taken the approaches to heritage studies through colonial, state, and community entities in Brazil and compared them to find out what kind of impacts those have had on people in Belize. And it's just a really cool study. And then also the Archaeology of New Netherland, which is a co-edited volume. And that one's on the influence of the Dutch Empire in North America. And this one's really cool because the artifacts that were uncovered had previously been buried beneath highways and city buildings. So it was kind of stuff that was there all along, and it's just now been discovered and has led to new information on the influence of the Dutch in early North America.
Very cool. That's very exciting. So we have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and ask those. The first one is, what would you say is the most rewarding part of being an acquisitions editor? And we'll start with Stephanie.
Hoping I would have some time to think about that. One of my coworkers asked me several years ago, which I valued more, the book or the author? And I think that's a really hard question to answer. But I think, I can't speak for Sean and Mary, but I would say everyone involved in the process, like the finished product of the book and the collaboration that goes into that, like working with an author, it's really a partnership. You know, the editor is getting the peer reviews and we send them to the author, but we write a summary first and we say, well, this is how I read them. How do you read them? And it's the beginning of a conversation. So that the peer review process itself is a conversation that we're able to facilitate. And then to continue the development of the book, just that the process of collaborating and getting people to, everyone is investing so much time and effort into making this a really like just wonderful product. And so much time and effort goes into our books. And the book itself, like just getting, that's why I can talk about my books forever. I'm so proud of these books that the authors have worked for years on and that the press has invested so much in. So that would be my answer.
Sean or Mary, do you have something different?
I don't have anything different, but I would kind of echo what Stephanie said. And I love reading peer reviews, especially when they're very detailed, for a couple of reasons. I always learn a lot from them, but also it's very heartening to see how much time and dedication some scholars spend to make a random piece of scholarship so much better. It's really exciting to see that. So it's a great service that our readers do for us, and it's always really fun to read those reports.
Absolutely. Everything that's been said so beautifully there. I might add one thing, which is I love, it's always exciting for me to be able to connect to scholars, it just comes up completely randomly in conversation, but they'll be describing something or, they've had a little, they've hit a bump in their research and I'll say, gosh, have you talked to, or have you read this or that? And I just love that, just being part of that network to connect people and ideas so that we can all learn in whatever fields we are in, just as people and engaged with this world of learning and the ecosystem around. Yeah.
That's one of the things that's really exciting. Coming from an academic background, you think about being in the classroom or publishing your own work as being the scholarly conversation, and we get to be involved in these conversations in different ways, but we're still participating and still like facilitating and taking part. And I really love having that opportunity and being able to help to direct an author to a scholar who's working on something similar, or to recruit the perfect reader for the manuscript. Like I know who that person is and I really want them to comment on it. being able to make those connections is really rewarding.
Great. All right. Another question we have is someone wants to know if you guys could maybe quickly outline kind of how you ended up where you were. I know for some of us it's a more diagonal path and not quite a straight line, but just kind of what led you to this position, what your trajectory has been like, I guess. And we'll start with Sean.
Oh, excellent. So like my formal education, I went to undergraduate at Davidson College. I went to UVA and UNC for grad school in English. And that kind of sounds like I had this plan, and I so did not. I mean, it was just a journey. During undergrad and between and then during graduate school, I was just on a journey. I interned at museums and at publications. I had a temporary job at the New Republic. I wrote freelance articles. I had a gazillion side gigs. But I mean, there is a through line there. I mean, you only get that through hindsight, I guess. But I was learning to put content together in a way to refine ideas and perspectives. And maybe more than anything, I was learning to become a generalist, right? And that's kind of what is one of the in the toolkit of an acquisitions editor. Being a generalist, knowing you're not the authority, but as everyone said with peer review, we get to bring authorities in and peers and just really enrich these great books that people are writing. So yeah, I was definitely a higgledy-piggledy path.
Mary, do you want to go next?
Sure. My path is less higgledy-piggledy. I was working on a PhD in religion at UF for, I guess this was, I got an email from the press about a assistant position in the marketing department while I was finishing my PhD. And at the time I had a different side job that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. So I thought I would try to get some skills and learn how to use an Excel spreadsheet. And so I worked in the marketing department for many years and I learned a lot there. And now I ended up somehow in acquisitions, which is great.
That's awesome.
It just occurred to me that all three of us spent time at UVA. I don't think I've put that together yet. I went to UVA for grad school, and Mary and Sean both did too, at different times. So we didn't know each other, but that's just really interesting. Yeah, mine, I don't know, maybe in between the higgledy-piggledy, perhaps. I went to grad school after undergrad and focused on literature and Middle Eastern studies. And I think through the process, was learning, like Sean said, that I am more of a generalist. I was interested in everything, and I couldn't sit still with one like really specific subject. And so I had done some internships in acquisitions and marketing at some university presses, and I had worked at UVA at the Papers of George Washington. And so I had some publishing experience, and the realization that I didn't want to spend a career focusing on something on one single subject, combined with the experience of working in university press and publishing, just the opportunity that I have to constantly be learning. And my background isn't in Latin American studies, and I have learned so much by being editor of this list. I started as an assistant at Florida 7 years ago, which is another commonality between me and Mary. We both assisted Sean at some point in our careers. So I started as an assistant and gradually took on more acquisitions responsibilities, more lists. And I think this is to build off something Sean said about the being a generalist. I think that's one of the challenges, the biggest challenges for me of being an acquisitions editor, is that I'm not the expert in any of these subjects. The authors are the experts and the peer reviewers. And it can be hard to be directing a list and to be signing books and to be developing books when you don't have the same level of experience. But it's also realizing that there's a unique perspective that you're bringing to the project as someone who's more of a general reader or an outside reader of the subject. And so when you were talking about that, Sean, I realized that's kind of the flip side to the rewarding parts of being in acquisitions, is that it is challenging to constantly be surrounded by these experts on all of these subjects and know that you're contributing something different to the conversation.
That's great. Another question that someone wants to know, which is a great question, is do you have tips for people who are looking to revise and publish a dissertation? Stephanie.
I was going to see who you're going to call on. So there's some really great resources that I would highly recommend. My favorite book by William Germano, From Dissertation to Book. I think he's hilarious. Maybe this is just an editor thinking another editor is really funny, but I think he's funny. For a dissertation, it's a different product. You're writing a dissertation to prove to a small group of people, your committee, that you know what you're talking about, that you are an expert, that you have learned everything you need to learn. And for a book, we're assuming you are the expert. If you're writing a book on something and we agree to publish it, you should be the expert. We don't need you to prove it. So it's more about, the book is more about building your own contributions rather than, so like the literature review, you wouldn't need that because everyone would be aware that one, you had read all of this literature, and two, they would be immersed in the conversation as well. And so the dissertation is really an opportunity to foreground your contribution and the author's voice. And there's more, but I'll let other people talk.
Sean.
I would just add maybe some strategic things to think about too. So as Stephanie said, your dissertation has a real purpose. Well, obviously, but I mean, it's a very specific purpose, and you are writing for that specific audience of your committee. But knowing or planning or thinking about the book that you might want to develop from that research, that can help you make decisions to have a more focused, perhaps specific dissertation, knowing that you can bring that research or add on, additional perspectives to the book later on, and that's really better for the book, and you're going to need to do that anyway. So if you kind of think, forward and backward a little bit, you can make really good decisions for your dissertation that also benefit the book writing process too.
Do you have anything to add, Mary?
I would add, this is just based on my experience having written a dissertation, that you really need to be passionate about what you're writing about, because you're going to be with this material for a very long time, and you've probably already been with that material for a really long time, which is great. And it reemphasizes the fact that you're the expert. But just make sure that that you really enjoy, I think, what your dissertation is, if you want to turn it into a book, because you'll be with it for a long time.
Yeah, and I think from both of your points, I think some authors can find it helpful to take a break, to step away from the material, because you've been living with it for your entire, the dissertation writing process, and then to have to pick it back up with a book. It can be helpful to step away from it and maybe write some articles or do some other research, and that gives you a different perspective to think strategically about how you want to shape it and add to it and build on it moving forward. So I don't know that everyone needs that, but I think it's something helpful to consider.
Great. All right. Well, following on that nicely, we have some questions about proposals, and I'm going to kind of put them all together and let you guys just talk about proposals. One of the questions is someone wants to know how to submit it, what information do you look for, and where would you send it? And someone else wants to know about the process for selecting them. So on your end, how do you choose ones? What is the average turnaround time? And then are there particular times of the year when it's best to submit a proposal? Like, are there times when you might have more time versus less time? I feel like we haven't started with Mary.
Oh, goodness. Well, I would say there probably isn't a better or worse time of year. I think we all kind of try to respond to proposals within like the same amount of time, no matter what. As far as tips, I would say make sure you know your audience and you know what you're writing, who you're writing for, and draft your proposal towards that. And if you're looking for a press, maybe research the press to see if they publish other books that are similar to the one that you have in mind to make sure that your project is a good fit there. And if I read a proposal, I try to respond to it within 2 weeks. I'm usually able to do that. So you should hear back from someone, whether it's someone who has seen your proposal in our submissions inbox, or if it was sent directly to me, you should hear back from someone in a reasonable amount of time. I know there were more questions. Could you repeat some of them?
Yeah, sorry. They were the process for selecting proposals and turnaround time. And then like what kind of things would you include in a proposal?
Oh, so to include in a proposal, you're going to want to send your information about you. So your CV, your resume, a summary of the proposal. We have a few documents on our website that we ask authors to submit along with their proposals. So if you visit our website and go to the For Authors section, you can find those. We also ask for writing samples. Preferably it would be a sample from the manuscript, but if you don't have that yet, you could submit a writing sample that you have written for some other publication. And a table of contents, just that you envision. And we'll ask for things like how long do you think the manuscript will be when it's finally published? How many images do you think you'd like to include? Will there be tables? What kind of citation style do you plan to use? Things like that. I think that covers it, but I might have left something out.
I might just add 2 things because that was a great list. Just kind of burrowing into 1 or 2. That description that Mary mentioned, you know, I encourage people to really hone their pitch. Spend some time refining that short description of your manuscript so that you're clearly conveying what the book is about, what the scope of the study is, and what the argument or contribution it makes is because those proposals, the way, and I've said this in another forum, it's an ephemeral document, but it's really critical to get into the editor's head and communicate what that project is about so that the editor can make a decision about whether that project is going to fit the list at the press. So it's odd in that it's ephemeral and yet it does play this important role. So that's why I think that pitch, that short description is really so important. Another thing to think about, and I see this a lot, or I hear it a lot as well at conferences, you know, we'll be talking with a prospective author about the proposal, and I'll say, you know, include a list of complementary books. And many authors will say, well, you know, there aren't any, there's no other book like mine. And while that's absolutely true, I mean, every book is unique. No book's an island, right? And we at the press, editors, we want to hear your thoughts about the other books that you think yours is in conversation with, right? And when you're describing those other books, it's also a great opportunity to distinguish yours in slightly different ways, right? It's like, my book is like this, but I have a different methodology, or this book is an earlier time period, or I have an interdisciplinary approach, or something like that. So you're recognizing the intellectual cohort for your study, but you're also distinguishing your own work.
And yeah, and so in addition to the pitch, being able to write a clear and concise summary is really difficult, but really important. I spend a lot of time with the annotated table of contents. I like to see how the author is actually going to do the thing they say they're going to do. You could have a really great pitch, a really great summary, but the chapters don't add up to it. And I don't see how all the pieces fit together. And so like Sean said, the proposal, it's not something that is widely read. We don't publish it. But it's a really important document, I think, for building that partnership between the author and the editor, for the editor to understand what the author's intentions are, and for the author to get the editor on board. The editor is sort of your advocate at the press, and the project's advocate. And so having as clear as possible of an idea of the goals of the project and how you plan to implement it makes the proposal a really important document to start building that relationship.
That's great, thank you. And in the chat, we linked our submission guidelines page as well. So if you want more detailed information, you can find it there. A question for Stephanie: what kinds of books on Caribbean literary studies are you interested in publishing? Yes, well, literature, I want to read all of it. So aside from that, I'm very, one direction that I want to be taking the list is doing more on Afro-Latinx perspectives. I think that's sort of reflected in some of the forthcoming titles. I am very interested in the environment in literature, especially, as we're dealing with this environmental crisis, and it's disproportionately affecting certain populations in certain parts of the world. I feel like that's very present in a lot of Latin American and Caribbean literature. So eco-criticism, things that are literature that's questioning these like strict boundaries, and literature about sexuality and gender. I think that's been a really strong area for us, and one that I'm really interested in building. Great. And then another question, you guys talked a little bit about watching webinars earlier when you were talking about your day-to-day, but what are some ways that you make sure that you're staying informed on new scholarship in the areas that you acquire? Sean, you can start.
Yeah, and just, that the webinars are truly a silver lining right now, not just, for editors, but scholars, everyone, to be able to remain in conversation and communication with each other, but continually learning too. And I hope it's something that we can take forward into the future years, as we all move forward to, something post-COVID. Reading in all forms, podcasts, and, talking with people. It's really just this constant stream of ideas that you need to immerse yourself in. Always, engaging with curiosity, with a critical eye, with questions, asking questions. That's a big one. It's as we're out of the conference realm, or not seeing people eye to eye or in person so much, rather, I think that there was a period where I was like, wow, I'm not like talking with people and asking questions as much. And I was like, whoo, and so you find that great 19th century technology, the telephone, or Zoom, so that you can continue those conversations, questioning, learning, reading, again, in all forms that media comes through, just keeping alive and alert to finding the material out there. Something that we, the three of us especially, have been thinking and talking a lot about is constantly kind
kind of interrogating your networks, where you're getting your information, which authors you're reaching out to, and kind of pushing that, looking for new groups of authors that maybe we haven't historically had a relationship with, or new forms of media or blogs, or like constantly trying to participate in the conversation, but also think about where the conversations are happening and trying to be present in those areas as well.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Sean and just say the webinars have been a real saving grace for me since we haven't been able to travel. That and the virtual conferences have been really nice because, as Stephanie pointed out to me, those provide us an opportunity to actually watch the presentations, whereas if we had attended the conferences in person, we may just be at the booth or holding meetings. So it's been great to have those virtual conferences as an additional source of learning this year.
Yeah, I attended more panels at last year when it was virtual than I ever have when I attended in person, just because you have such a short amount of time to meet with everybody, and you have to stay at the booth and sell the books, and there's so many things that an editor needs to be doing that participating in those panels is really exciting.
Yeah, and if they overlap in time, you don't have to choose one or the other. You can just watch another one later.
That's great. So someone asked about internships, and I'll give a couple details, and then if you guys want to talk about some of the things that your interns do in acquisitions. So we have semester-based internships available. Our applications will open in late March. And then we also have an opportunity for UF grad students in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in partnership with the UF Center for the Humanities and the Public Sphere. The application for that is March 8th, and that website is humanities.ufl.edu. So we do have opportunities for both undergrad students and grad students who are interested in getting involved. And I will let the editors talk a little bit about what the interns do for them and how they get to learn. And we'll start with Mary.
Well, I work with one of my colleagues in acquisitions to train interns to do sort of more office-based tasks, which can be a little bit not as exciting, but we also work to find exciting work for them to do. So we give them proposals. I think my colleague Rachel has been helping one of our interns think about an art program for one of the books, or one of our forthcoming books. And that's really exciting to get to kind of look more closely at those kinds of details about book publishing. So we try to also find non-rudimentary tasks for our interns to make things more exciting. And Sean can tell you a little bit about some of the research projects that she has set for our interns, because she has some really fun ones for them also. So.
Well, right now, one of our interns is trying to find contact information for Sandra Day O'Connor. So if anybody who's watching has her contact information and can share it, because that one might be a little hard. And that's going to be in a forthcoming collection of op-eds by David Colburn and Governor Bob Graham at Florida. Yeah, I mean, the research that interns can do is so important. Sometimes, I've asked them to find a specific photograph, or more broadly, what could we use? We published a This Day in Florida history book during our anniversary year last year. And in the run up to that, interns helped us come up with, they were scouring, University of Florida Press books on all sorts of different daily topics that we could include as our entries for that book. And that was a lot of fun, because they were, I might go in and look for a certain type of daily factoid, but they were all into other topics, and it was just a great collective effort that way. And just speaking about internships generally, I think it's a really wonderful pathway and a valuable pathway into a career in publishing, for that matter. I can't recommend it enough. I mean, I was sort of a, someone who initially looked a lot like a career intern, right? I mean, I just strung a bunch in. But start in any department. You're going to learn so much. You're going to get a foot in the door. And then through that process, you get a good sense of what these very different processes and roles are throughout the entire press. And so it's just a really, really valuable and educational way to get a sense of what the career of publishing looks like.
Yeah, kind of like our jobs. I don't think interns have the same day.
Yeah.
Or twice in a row.
The great thing about the internship, even though there are some more administrative tasks, is that I feel like the interns see projects at every stage, and they have their hands on projects at every stage. And it can be a really great opportunity to read everything that crosses their desk, and ask questions. You have editors who are more than happy to talk about their books for as long as you'll listen to them. So it can be a really great learning opportunity. I like to send interns proposals, share book proposals with them if it's a project that I'm not sure about, if I'm on the fence, or I just want to get another perspective. I think having a different background, bringing a different background to the project can be really helpful. Interns often point out things that I just didn't occur to me. I like to see if they get really excited about a project, and maybe I wasn't excited, but the intern was, and so I'm going to rethink that. They've given some really great feedback. And I also like I love to have interns read conference programs for a similar reason. I like to see what they're excited about, what panels they would attend if they were going to the conference, what they think would make a really interesting book, which scholars seem really exciting to them. I think it's a really great way to supplement just me as an editor looking at all of these materials, getting different perspectives.
That's great. We have a couple interns who are commenting that they owe a lot. They had a great experience interning with us, so that's great to hear. Another question about proposals is someone wants to know how much of your manuscript should be completed when you submit a proposal. Sean, you all looked like you were thinking, so.
It depends. That's my favorite phrase in publishing. It depends. Really, truly, we as editors, we field proposals from before anything is written to the full manuscript has been drafted. It does depend. With a dissertation or revised dissertation rather, you're going to have that basic block of research done. You're going to have a form of the written text, but probably you will have started thinking about your revisions perhaps, but haven't gotten into them. So that's going to be fairly early. Or with a trade book, for instance, trade manuscript, a general interest topic, it's probably going to be on the earlier end of that timeline than later. But a number of very good projects, sometimes it depends on the author's preferences and how best they work, right? Some people know this book. They clearly see the need for it. They've articulated, and they really want to get into it and just write it and get a certain amount of work done, and then start the conversation with the publisher about, positioning it slightly differently or something like that. So there is no one right time. It depends a little bit on your comfort levels and your preferences on working as an author. It depends a little bit perhaps on the type of book that you're doing, whether it's a revised dissertation or a later book project, something like that.
I always encourage people to talk to editors that you might be interested in working with, even if you don't have a proposal, and see if they have recommendations about when to submit a proposal. And they might have some feedback. They will let you know whether the project would be a good fit for their press. but they might have some feedback on how you could shape the project. They can give you more, maybe talk to you about the specific, the it depends situation and see what works best for you. But I think you're right, Sean, the trade books, the general interest books happen earlier, I feel like, the book idea, whereas scholarly books, it's really helpful, again, to go back to the proposal, it's helpful to see at least a plan of how the pieces are going to fit together, a plan that the author is confident they can execute, even if all the chapters aren't written, that you at least have an idea of what's going to be in the chapters and how they're going to fit together. But reach out to editors, like we're happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I think reaching out to an editor is definitely a good start if you're unsure of how far you need to be into the manuscript before submitting a proposal. It could ultimately save you time to know what the editor needs. So it's always better to ask.
That's great. All right, we are just about out of time. I want to ask if any of you have anything that you really just want to make sure that people know, either a misconception, a frequently asked question, something that you didn't get to talk about in this hour that you really just want to say. And I won't call on anyone. I'll see if I don't want to make you have something. But if there's just anything else that you wanted to touch on. And then I'll also say that contact info for Stephanie, Sean, and Mary is available at the link. It just went up in the chat. Okay, I will ask a follow-up question since none of you seemed excited. Someone wants to know, when you say reach out to editors, do you mean cold email or at conferences? What would be your advice during COVID about how best to reach out to an editor?
I think either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I think, recognizing that it might take a little time to respond to an email. It might not be an immediate response, but yeah, send us an email. Social media, I think we're all trying to be more active on social media during the pandemic as well.
All right, that's great. Any other last thoughts before I close us out?
No?
Thanks for all the great questions that came in, people who sent things, and thanks. I would just want to thank Jenna for organizing us today. It was
Yeah,
really great.
Thank you.
And check out all of the books. Check out all of our books and these wonderful backgrounds that Jenna made for us.
Yeah, of course, and thank you guys for sharing your time today, and I hope it was helpful, and we'll see you all soon. And like I said a moment ago, feel free to reach out to any of the three of them. They really are happy to talk to potential authors and scholars.